Wonderful. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are Columbia Organization of Rising Entrepreneurs, the largest professional student organization at Columbia University, with the goal of educating, inspiring, and launching the next generation of entrepreneurs. It is an absolute joy to be able to moderate this panel, Comunidades Digitales, celebrating and preserving the diversity and the complexity of the Latinx identity, our final event celebrating Latinx Heritage Month, September 15th to October 15th, a time to uplift the contributions, ingenuity, history, and resilience of the Latinx creators and founders who have paved the way for us. Thank you everyone for coming. This speaker series is hosted by Core Elevate, a new initiative committed to creating spaces that uplift marginalized communities within Core, Columbia University, West Harlem, and beyond. My name is Bella Barnes. I'm a Black and Mexican writer and scholar by way of Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm a junior double majoring in English and urban. Can we have folks turn off? Okay. If everyone could keep their mics muted, that would be helpful. Thank you very much. I'm a junior double majoring in English and urban studies at Columbia College, and I'm also head of outreach for Core Elevate. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our brilliant speakers this evening. To begin, we welcome Djali Alessandra Brown-Cepeda. Djali is the founder and curator of Nuevayorkinos and a second-generation Dominican-American from Inwood, Manhattan. She's been featured in publications including Days Digital, the New York Times, and Remezcla. Her work has been featured in exhibitions at El Museo del Barrio and the MACLA. She has also spoken at institutions including Harvard University, Barnard College, and the Caribbean Cultural Center, African Diaspora Institute. A graduate of Eugene Lang College at the New School University, Brown-Cepeda works in film and television production at Mass Appeal Media. Most recently, she produced the Cannes-winning short, Railroad Ties, and The Wilderness Method. Welcome, Djali. It is also my pleasure to welcome our second speaker, Frances Solá-Santiago. Born in Puerto Rico, Frances Solá-Santiago is a writer and producer based in New York City. Her journalism is focused on the intersections of style, beauty, culture, and identity, and has been published by the New York Times, Glamour Magazine, Refinery 29, Rolling Stone, NPR, among others. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of Emperifollá, a style and beauty digital platform focused on Latinx communities, launched in 2019. Hi, Frances.
Hi.
Thank you both so much for being here this evening. I was saying to you all before the call started, but you two have been some of my inspirations for the past at least 5 years. And so it's truly incredible getting to speak with you all tonight. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. To start, I would love if you all could walk us through your journeys, so to speak. How did you get to where you both are today?
So I can go first. Well, when it comes to Nuevayorkinos was started last February, actually on February 14th, when I was in Dominican Republic visiting family. I was watching a show, and as I was watching this show, I really didn't like it, and it was supposed to be, this quintessential, radical Afro-Latinx, narrative that this show was supposed to be following, and it didn't do that. The show was just very colonial, and it perpetuated narratives that were, very white-centric, Eurocentric. And so I watched the whole show because, like you said, or like you mentioned, I work in film and TV. And so as a filmmaker, I never like to, watch something like, 5 minutes into it and then give my opinion, right? I like to watch the whole thing so there's something to critique. And so after I was done, what ended up happening was that I couldn't go to bed because I was very angry by this particular show. And I was on Instagram, right? And by this time I was already out of college for 2 years, and I was scrolling, mindless scrolling, but also maybe some of us know that 3 a.m., light bulb that sparks, right? When it comes to our creative endeavors. And I thought to myself, okay, wait, you know, there are so many different archives out here. There are so many different niche audiences that are being catered to, and these, you know, unique stories and experiences that are being archived, right, or chronicled. And so I was looking, and there's, you know, tons of 70s, you know, vintage fashion archives, or Bollywood archives, African art archives. And one of my former professors turned friends, Amy Sal, she is the founder of Sunu Journal, Our Journal, which is this, you know, journal for critical African thought, photography, film, etc. Pan-African, right, diasporic. And so thinking about Amy, thinking about just this show that was horrendous, and then thinking about being a Latina from New York, I said to myself, wait, where's our representation? And so I was looking for it. And what I did come across was lots of beautiful West Coast centric archives, particularly Veteranas and Rucas by Guadalupe Rosales. And I love that archive. It is one of, I mean, it's just so important. The fact that it exists is an act of resiliency in itself, right? But in the same breath, since Latinidad, just like Blackness, is not monolithic, I don't have that experience, right? Like my experience of Latinidad, whatever that even means, right? Like what is Latinidad? But my experience of it is New York City, Washington Heights, the Bronx, Inwood, Dominican, Black, Caribbean, right? And that's a different experience than the West Coast, right? And so I said to myself, I might as well start it, because before someone else starts it, and then we all know how this works, you know, particularly not just here in the States, but both back home in our, you know, countries of origin, we know that the narratives and the gatekeepers, so to speak, of culture are white, right? They're either white American or white Colombian, white Venezuelan, right? White, the ruling class. And so I said to myself, before someone who is a white Latino, Latinx, Latina thinks of this concept, I need to start this thing myself, because when are we ever, as women of color, as Black women, as second generation women, as immigrant women, when are we ever in positions of power to create and foster our own narratives? And so I went through various iterations of Nuevayorkinos, of the name itself. I was like, oh, it's gonna be Nuevayorkinas and all about the women who hold us down. But then I said to myself, oh, so that's not fair for my, you know, life. And I don't want to be a hypocrite, because the men in my life held me down. I mean, my best friend is my grandfather, right? And so even though he's an old man and, you know, he has old views and whatever, you know, it's my grandfather. And for so many of us, you know, we're raised intergenerationally, particularly with immigrant communities, you know, whether we're Dominican, Latinx, whether we're Italian, right? And so I said to myself, cool, I'm going to have this open for everyone. Then I thought Nuevayorkinequis with the X, you know, instead of the O or the A, but I also didn't want to necessarily ostracize an entire generation of folks who just don't understand. And I said, maybe what I will, or not what I thought to myself, what I will do rather is whenever I talk, I always use Latinx, right? And so that'll come across, that activism will come across linguistically in interviews and comments and captions, etc. So it went through various iterations, but then I woke up my parents at like 4 a.m. and I was like, I need your computer. I need to go on Squarespace and I need to buy this domain. And that's where it started, and here we are. It started as something completely different, just as an archival project, but now as Emperifollá has grown, right? I'm sure how it started versus where we're at today is something completely beautiful and different, right, than we expected. And so now it's become not just this archival project of photos, right? It's a project of healing. It's a project of storytelling. It's a project, it's anti-gentrification, right? In its essence. And so it's just taken on a life of its own, and I'm very excited to see where my project and where your project, Frances, and all of our projects, I'm so excited to see where they go. So
yeah, I see a lot of what the story of Emperifollá is in your story as well. Emperifollá for me started, I feel like it started since I was born. The name Emperifollá came to me in 2018, the summer of 2018. I was reading, actually, like mindlessly scrolling on my couch. Emperifollá by Laia Garcia. She's a Puerto Rican writer who's now at Garage Magazine. And what she described in that essay was very much what I grew up with. I grew up with a mom, and I grew up in a matriarchy of an amazing woman, my grandmother, who had, a lot of children that are women, and they were all always kind of relying on fashion and beauty and their lipstick and their hoops and you know, everything that they put together for, you know, sit in La Sala during Christmas, as a kind of way to really elevate themselves. And it was never about other people. It was very much about themselves and the ritual of putting themselves together. And I always just saw that. I also grew up with a mom who sews and is a huge fashion fan and always had magazines, but I never really saw myself in those magazines. Like, I saw myself because I am a white Puerto Rican and that's what happens, but I didn't see the rituals that I grew up with. I didn't see the, like, kind of that very intrinsic connection with fashion and style and something that is very, very rooted in the oppression and the kind of struggles that we live as. You know, my family comes from the rural area of Puerto Rico, and you know, kind of overcoming all those struggles through what you wear, through who you are, is very much kind of a sign of, you know, of overcoming a lot of setbacks in your life. And it's kind of an act of revolution. And so I also didn't see in a lot of these fashion magazines, you know, the multiplicity of who we are as Latinx women, because, you know, I didn't see Black women, I didn't see Indigenous women, I didn't see, you know, multi-ethnic Latinx women. And so that's something that we do at Emperifollá. And so, you know, I had actually, like Djali said, you know, her project started as something different, and mine started, you know, with a conversation with our photo editor, Maridelis, who had actually reached out to me first and was like, hey, I want to do a book about, she's a photographer, so she wanted to do a photo book about the kind of like the resilience and the relationship that Puerto Rican women have with style. And we actually started that conversation in 2017. A year went by, we never talked about it again, until I read this essay by Laya, and I was like, this is it. We have to do the site. At first I wasn't sure if it was gonna be a site, an Instagram account, I don't know, a zine. We had so many ideas for it, but we were like, I mean, we can create this brand and let it be what it can become. You know, we can start with the site and have something else come later. So, you know, I kind of like united the dots. I connected to the rest of the team, and by May 2019, we were launched. And honestly, what we've done in a year and a half has really reshaped the way a lot of people have thought about how Latinx style and beauty can be represented. We've covered so many different communities, you know, what it's like to be a Muslim Latina, what it's like to be a Chinese Puerto Rican, what it's like to be a Black Dominican growing up in New York City, what it's like to be, for example, we interviewed Denise Bidot, who is one of like the biggest plus size and body positive models out there, really advocating for women that are just regular sized women. So, you know, so far it's been a real journey and a real struggle because, you know, I moved here 4 years ago with no resources and no connections. And, you know, it's really paid, you know, it's really been about paying my dues and creating community and spaces with the people that deserve to be included in those spaces and for those people as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for both of your insight on starting your platforms. I am so grateful for the intention and time into creating both of your spaces. So thank you very much. I'd like to ask each of you 2 questions, and then we'll go back to asking questions of both of you together. Djali, I know that you work as a doula with a focus on supporting healthy brown and Black births, also as a filmmaker and also as an educator. How do your multiple identities influence your work, specifically in documenting life, and how do you honor each person's narrative?
Yeah, I mean, well, first and foremost, everything I do is for the people. And I don't see a difference between archiving our stories of our pasts and between that and being there for birth, I mean, it's part of the same continuum of life, right? I mean, like, what is time even? I think if 2020 has shown us anything, it's that time really does not exist, and it's a man-made construction, right? And so when it comes to both birth work and birth activism and birth advocacy and Nuevayorkinos and the narratives, I mean, it's I treat it the same way. When it comes to Nuevayorkinos, I'm very, so everyone that submits the photos, they do so on their own volition. It's very voluntary. I have a back and forth sometimes with folks, depending on if they send me, too little information or, too much information, and they need to edit, because I don't edit anything that people write. I refuse to do that because I think that is an agent of white supremacy and it's elitism in action. Who am I to say that because I have a college degree that I speak better English or better anything, or I'm more, I'm more academic than fulano on the corner. I mean, that is just, again, that's white supremacy. And so it's very important that we eradicate those mindsets from our minds, right? But going back to birth, when I talk to, an expecting parent, it's the same thing, you talk to them with care, you thank them for trusting you, to be part of their lives in such a critical moment. I tell each and every person, and I mean, you can see like through my DMs, I tell every single person that submits to Nuevayorkinos, thank you. Thank you for not only trusting me, but trusting the process, trusting the project, believing in the project, and trusting me with not only, a portion of their history, but with their family's history. Djali, my name means griot, and Djalis are, and griots are, so griots are the people who hold oral tradition, right? And a Djali particularly comes from West Africa. And so they are in charge of knowing and passing down the village's history through oral tradition. And, if there aren't Djalis, then there is no history. And so I think that's a very random, it's a random sort of like connecting the dots between your name and your fate and whatever. And yes, that was the topic of my college essay when I got into school, because like, why wouldn't it be? But yeah, I mean, I think that they're so similar, archival work and birth work. I mean, just like the physicality of it, when you're dealing with archives, it's very soft, it's very gentle, it's very loving, it's very compassionate. When you're dealing with an expected parent, whether they are single, whether they have a partner, whether they're queer, whether they're straight, tall, short, skinny, full-figured, whatever we're dealing with, it's the same thing. You talk with care, with compassion, you give yourself. I feel deeply that with everyone that I talk to through Nuevayorkinos, as well as people who I speak with, regarding birth work or any sort of ancestral, alchemy work, because aside from birth work, I do other sorts of healing work as well. And so again, I truly feel like, I am so grateful, because not only are people through Nuevayorkinos and then through birth allowing me to be part of their space, but it's also forming, I strongly feel some sort of relationship, right? A friendship, a family, a familial relationship. And that's something that also is present in both Nuevayorkinos and birth work. Going back to, growing up uptown, my family is very small, right? Biologically, I'm related to many people, but my family is small. And because of that, the stereotypes of Latinidad and what it means to just be a person of color is we have huge families, we have cookouts, we have this, and I never experienced that. And so it was always happening adjacent. And while I was, accepted by and invited to different events and occasions by, friends and community members, it's not the same, and so through Nuevayorkinos, as well as through birth work, I find myself, gaining family. I mean, I have a woman that I call Titi, that I met through Nuevayorkinos, and she, came through a blizzard to come to the Nuevayorkinos' first birthday party. And she was like, "Ay, mama, I had to meet you. Like, I love like what you're doing." And she's, this Puerto Rican woman from Los Sures, from South Williamsburg, born and raised, has been there forever. You know, all of her friends are still there. She always goes back. And so that sense of community and that sense of love and that sense of holding you down, right? Like, I'm there for you. That is my feeling to Nuevayorkinos, and by proxy to the New York City Latinx community, and by proxy the New York City immigrant community, and by proxy Black and brown folk everywhere. And also, you know, through birth work, right? It's like, I'm here to physically hold you down, to emotionally hold you down, and to spiritually hold you down. I like to tell my clients that I work with that think of me as your homegirl, right? And it's the same thing with Nuevayorkinos. I don't want to ever, you know, make people feel like, oh, there's some, you know, staunchly conservative and, you know, super formal person running this project. No, like, it's a homegirl, right? It's the girl who has the hoops and was jumping double dutch in the recess yard, you know. It's all of us. And so I think that both Nuevayorkinos and birthwork are very similar, but I never necessarily thought about it until you brought it up. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. Thank you for the breadth of that and the depth of your care for our communities. It's spectacular and inspiring. So grateful.
Thank you.
Frances, I recently read your article interviewing Karina Del Valle Sorsky and Mara Corsino on their work for the most recent cover of the New York Times, featuring Bad Bunny. How do you feel about the recent spotlight on Puerto Rico, particularly the music of PR, as a Boricua writer and creator? How does this connect with your work as well with Emperifollá?
Sure. Well, that was a very exciting piece to write, just because I was assigned this piece and I hadn't really understood how monumental it was when I started writing it. And when I found out that it was like an all Puerto Rican women led production and the cover of the New York Times Magazine featuring Bad Bunny and me writing kind of like the behind the scenes as well, I just really felt part of like this very unique moment that I hadn't seen in ever. so that just felt very special. You know, the spotlight in Puerto Rico in the last, I would say 3-4 years has been both triumphant and painful. You know, a lot of the spotlight in Puerto Rico has been because of our crisis, because of Hurricane Maria, because of the protests that happened last year that ousted the governor. And all of that has come with a lot of pain and a lot of glory. I am very glad that a lot of really the spotlight that has been put on Puerto Rico has really illuminated the rest of the world to what it is like to be a colonial subject in the 21st century. You know, this is something that I lived my entire life and always felt like I had to explain myself so much because people didn't believe it, because people, you know, thought all these stereotypes about Puerto Ricans, didn't understand what we were, still don't understand what we are. I don't understand what we are sometimes because we're so complex and our relationship to the US and the world is so complex. But you know, moving more towards the music industry, I feel like in what relates to my work is that this recent spotlight on reggaeton, you know, which is a music that it was commercialized in Puerto Rico, but was not created in Puerto Rico. It was very much created in a multiplicity of places like Panama and Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean region. This is something that I really talked to Karina Del Valle, is that it's, you know, the fact that someone like Bad Bunny or someone like Ozuna has been on really important covers really means that they need journalists and media people that talk their language, that speak Spanish, that know what it's like to live their experiences. And they have changed completely the media landscape around them. They have forced the New York Times to hire writers like Karina. They forced the New York Times to hire photographers like Mara Corsino, who's a Puerto Rican woman. And so that to me speaks in the power of, you know, all these industries, fashion, music, you know, TV, film. When we have people that represent us, it also brings along a community along with them. You know, it opens the doors to so many other things that beyond seeing yourself, it's also employing and really bringing back resources to the rest of the community. The spotlight on Puerto Rico, I really enjoy it. I love teaching people about where I come from. And it has totally reshaped my career. I never thought in my life, I moved to New York to be a fashion journalist, and that was it. I thought that I was going to be covering, the fashion weeks in Paris and Milan, and it completely redefined my career. I moved to New York and really started writing about Puerto Rico because I was missing home, because I was having to educate so many people and was seeing that media in New York and just in the United States in general got my island wrong, and someone had to kind of reshift the narrative. And I know that has been the case for a lot of other Puerto Rican writers as well. And so it's just a matter of really, giving us a space and also crafting our own spaces to really tell our stories. And when it comes to reggaeton and when it comes to urbano and trap and other types of genres inside what it's so-called música urbana, it's just been very enjoyable to really see people see what I grew up seeing as a genre that was criminalized, that was disregarded as these are just they're wrong, they're sexualizing women, they're doing all of these wrong things, but with that comes a lot of responsibility. And I feel like with the boom of reggaeton and all of these genres, we really owe a lot to these communities that actually birthed these genres. And I'm not particularly seeing that. I don't know what's the benefit here for, comunidades in marginalized communities in Puerto Rico and other parts of the Caribbean and Panama and Latin America, that we shall see. But I am very glad that the world is getting to know what the Caribbean is made of.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this question I feel like connects to both of your work. So if you both would answer it, it'd be wonderful. But what is it like creating and fostering community within the digital world on your platforms? And have there been any challenges or benefits during COVID?
I can go first. So when it comes to fostering digital communities, I think, it's very tricky, right? I think a lot of it goes to the content curators' intentions, right? And I think that something that people have told me about Nuevayorkinos, like whenever I talk to them, it's that, they really like, yo, this is so dope. It's like every time that I read this, I think of my mom, or I think of this, or I think of that. And because the stories, I don't censor them, like I mentioned, right? So I have stories that are happy, stories that are sad, stories about, again, resiliency, stories about assimilation, not feeling X enough, not feeling Y enough. And because of that, it paints a very, or a much greater picture of what it means to be a New York City Latinx folk, right? And so, because again, we're very similar, but we're not the same, right? Because we're not a monolithic and nobody exists in a vacuum. When it comes to COVID, I feel that it was very important. It was very difficult, right? Because for many reasons, but when it comes to showing up online, and I'm curious, Frances, if you deal with this or if you have dealt with this, when it comes to showing up online, people forget that it's an actual person behind an account, right? Or it's an actual person behind these works. And so lots of people expect and want and comment and criticize and, right? And so there's a very gentle and very important balance between continuing to show up for the community in a time where, my goodness, do we need community, right? And do we need each other? But also carving out time to make space for yourself, to check in with yourself and say, okay, you know what, today I cannot go on Instagram because I, don't want to see another video of a Black person being killed, or I don't want to have a white person, whether they're Latinx or American, I don't want to have them DM me, oh, look, I just saw this video, I'm so sorry, standing with you, and it's a snuff video of X man, John Doe, being killed by X cop in X city, right? And so the digital sphere, particularly right now, is just so heavy. because of COVID, the news, right? Because of the election news, because of police brutality, the national reckoning on race, if we're even having one. I don't think we are. I think that people are going to go back to their lives, because whether or not, you know, you are actively thinking about your role in a white supremacist nation, you know, going back to what you were saying, Frances, about navigating a colonial space or being a colonial subject in the 21st century. I mean, same. I'm a Black woman. I live in America. I'm a colonial subject. I'm from the hood. I am from a zip code that not many people get their, you know, degrees in, right? And so there's so many things, so many policies, so many laws, so much against us, right? And so I think that, you know, it's just so much sometimes, so taxing to be on social media. Going back to COVID, I saw though that it was very crucial that Nuevayorkinos kept on being there for folks. And what I saw that was interesting was that lots of people started to use Nuevayorkinos as a way to write obituaries for their deceased loved ones. And that was something that was very hard for me, because of course, I mean, the feeling of gratitude for folks who felt so compelled and so, again, trusting of me and of my process and of my platform and of my project that I hold so dear to my heart. You know, they wanted to share something so crucial with me. And it's very hard, you know, because the human in me, I don't read these stories with a blank face, you know, like they affect me too. I don't comment about it because it's my project, but I'm being affected as well. And so it was very heartwarming and heart-wrenching at the same time, creating these spaces for collective grief, and then seeing people, which was so beautiful. And I see this a lot with Nuevayorkinos in general, seeing people collectively come together for one another in times of need, to grieve someone's, you know, lost grandmother or somebody's lost mother or father. People really feeling, you know, or really sending their condolences, really being there and, you know, providing a virtual shoulder for the person who submitted. When it comes to navigating social media or navigating Nuevayorkinos right now, when it comes to the national reckoning, like I mentioned, on race and on police brutality and white supremacy, that's a completely different conversation. That was met with lots of adversity. That was met with lots of animosity, because white supremacy runs rampant in Latin America and the Caribbean. You know, we, and I say this all the time, we here in the continental United States are 100 steps ahead than where we are in our homelands, right? And it's very difficult because here we're not only, and I'll talk for myself, you know, I'm a Black woman, I'm a Dominican woman, my father's African American and Indigenous, my mom is Dominican, both parents, right? And so, but I grew up in a very Pan-African household, the whole thing, it's great. But it's very hard when trying to talk to our communities, and immigrant communities in general. This is not just a Latinx issue, but talking to our families who come from a different mindset, a different culture, a different country, a different, you know, history, a history of trauma, right? Usually, oftentimes, histories of oppression, histories of being silenced. It's very difficult to say, hey, if you're watching Telemundo and Univision only, you're getting a very sanitized, whitewashed version of, or, you know, retelling of, and I say retelling very loosely, of what's happening, right? And so there's so many steps to it, and there's so many nuances. I felt, and I can be honest, I felt very I felt very put down by our community when it came to me, a Black woman, you know, creating space on Instagram to talk about race and to talk about, hey, how do we as Afro-Latinos, Black Latinos, you know, talk to our families? How do we as allies, as white Latinx folk talk to our families? And I was met with a lot of animosity. I was met with lots of folks telling me, hey, you know, that doesn't exist in Latin America because I'm Colombian or I'm Venezuelan. It's like, no, you're white, because slavery, colonization existed in the Americas. There was never a time, if we want to talk about history, there was never a time where the continental United States had, you know, physically, quantity, more enslaved African folk and, you know, folks of color than Latin America and the Caribbean. Brazil was the last country to outlaw slavery in 1888. And we know, if that's the year and the date that the man is putting on it, that it would transpire most likely covertly into the early, 20th century, right? And so it's just it's very taxing, it's very daunting, and it's something that has been an interesting practice, navigating social media as someone who has to show up and who wants to show up, but also understanding when to take a step back and understanding, there's no way that I can change every single person's mind who is on this page that may think, or have a different ideology than mine. But all I can do is at least provide the information. But it was, and it is very interesting to see what our community likes, what our community doesn't like, what's more comfortable, what's not received. And it's usually when it comes to our stories of resiliency, of assimilation, of our moms, our dads, everyone is all for it. When it comes to race, no one wants to talk about it. And I've even seen it, this year, so many people talking about, oh yeah, Latinx Heritage Month, like we're gonna make this more inclusive for Black Latinos. I didn't see that across the board. It was very, very minuscule, right? And so we have work to do, but the social sphere, it's very interesting. And when you look at it intersectionally, it becomes 10 times harder.
Yeah, I feel like for us at Emperifollá, really navigating a digital space before COVID was a joy for us, because we connected with so many people that felt so identified with what we were doing, felt like the representation out there wasn't enough, that their stories were being told through our eyes and through our storytelling and through our content. Once COVID hit, I think the hardest thing for us has really been shift our content creation online. One of the things that we really pride in ourselves in is our monthly profile series. We meet women in their spaces, and gender non-binary folks as well. We meet them in their spaces. We have coffee with them. We chat we're in our tia sala, during Christmas or whatever. And that was really hard, especially for me, as a journalist and a writer. I really thrive in those conversations. And I feel like the team as well. We lost a lot of kind of that community healing that always happened when we had a conversation about, for example, with Sandra Garcia, who's a New York Times journalist, Dominican here from the Heights. We had a whole conversation about, what it's like for her to have plants in her environment and how she watches them and she notices that they don't compare to each other, and that's how she wants to be with the rest of humanity. Those types of conversations are not the same online. And so fostering that type of storytelling has been really, really difficult because, the internet connection isn't good, or people just don't feel comfortable when they have a laptop in front of them. But at the same time, there's been a lot of responsibility that has come with the type of storytelling that we do during COVID. Our communities are being the hardest hit out of all of this, especially Black Latinx, especially the Black community and African Americans and undocumented workers here in New York City and all over the country. And so for me, what I started seeing is that we could use what we do as a way to really bring forth a healing message of, here are the tools that we have to really, whether you're at home, whether you're a farm worker, an essential worker, we have always used these tools, whether it is looking at ourselves in the mirror 5 minutes before heading out, putting on our mask now. It is kind of that self-love that we have for ourselves. And I feel like driving through that that kind of storytelling through in our digital platforms has been the key to us being able to communicate with our audiences. And not only that, but having them trust us and also heal each other and communicate with each other and understand that we're not, this is really a community effort. This isn't just about Emperifollá. This isn't just about an Instagram page or a site. This is about a community. And honestly, the feedback has been incredible to really see people, really identify themselves with what we're doing. We did a story about Amy Vega, who is a nail artist here in Washington Heights, and we talked about how her business was affected by COVID. Today we published a story about the Supima design collection, that designer who she won this year, and she's a Puerto Rican, and she did a whole collection about what the world will be like post-COVID. So really kind of like imagining a new world and really navigating the new world digitally or also in person, through style, through beauty, and what that means for our communities has been both challenging, but incredibly powerful, because it has really forced us to imagine new possibilities of doing what we do, and connecting with people, because that's really the ultimate goal. But I really resonated with something that Djali said, which is that, you know, people forget, and I forget, that we are people behind Emperifollá, and behind any other Instagram page. And I feel like, you know, the content production, when, you know, I went to journalism school, and it's always about the breaking news. It's always about, you know, turning around that really important story all the time. And I felt like I was in my room and I didn't know what to write about. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to post. I was like, what are we going to do? I don't know what's happening behind, like beyond the four walls of my room, because I'm not going out. I'm not creative. I need time to myself. And so really, as content creators, and just anyone really, understanding that right now you don't have to produce at 100 has been the biggest lesson, because no matter if we, you know, that transition to digital really takes a lot out of you, because everyone's like, okay, we can do things digitally. Let's keep performing at the same level that we did before the pandemic. And I feel like reminding yourself that digital is not a substitute for real life, and that we are in an unprecedented time, and that the people that you are talking to and are having a community with, in your page or in your project or in your platform, are also going through this, is really important for us to really foster something beyond this moment.
Thank you so much for that, Frances, and just the detail that you had to what it is like creating and working during this pandemic, and during a time that we feel has never happened, right? Maybe it's reminiscent of multiple moments in history, but never all at once. And you're right that the digital world can never quite be fully human. I do think, though, maybe this is just me, this conversation has felt the most human I've had in a long, long, long time, if not since the beginning. So thank you.
I will take, I mean, if I'm not interacting with any humans other than my roommate, I will take Zoom meetings and anything to see a human face. But of course, I mean, this is what we have, and we use the tools that we have, and it's great that we're able to do stuff like this.
Right. Thank you. Well, I think I will open it up for questions from our audience. So if folks would like to unmute and ask their questions, or if not, and they would like to put them in the chat, that's totally fine too.
Thank you guys so much for speaking. This has been incredibly inspiring and really authentic. And I agree with you, Bella. This is like really just like one of these digital interactions that you have that are just really empowering. So I did want to talk a little bit more about like interacting in this digital space and how you guys really share your authentic voice and mission on social media, and how you keep yourself grounded through storytelling, because a lot of you touched on what you touched on was like making sure that you're, you know, taking up space as a Latinx woman, but also sharing that space through like this digital platforms that you guys have created. So I would love to hear how you guys do that, and how you guys also self-care through this all.
Well, when it comes to, well, thank you for that question. When it comes to the digital sphere, I mean, yes, there's certain times that I go against what I'm about to say because like we're all humans, right? But like I really generally speaking, I don't care about like what the response is going to be, right? Because I grew up with a mother who single mother, you know, for a long time. She was young. She grew up in 1980s uptown, you know what I mean? And so it's just a completely different mentality, right? I'm very, you know, I say it often, I'm very happy and I'm very proud and I feel very lucky to have the upbringing that I had, right? Because my parents were young. One was from Soundview in the Bronx, one was from Dykeman, and they met through music and through their art, right? My father was a sound engineer, and he worked on like almost everything like that you can think about from like the 90s hip hop scene. And my mom was a poet, right? And in them coming together and creating this thing over here, they passed down to me. And again, growing up uptown, it wasn't a thing necessarily of yes, you know, dress cute because you want, you know, people to not think you look crazy, and you know, hang out with folks, and you know, yes, there's a certain level of acceptance, right? Clearly that like we all have as social creatures, but the, you know, authentic self, as you mentioned, I just I don't have a censor. I don't care if people agree, and I don't care if people disagree. It'd be great to have a conversation. I'm always open to have one. But when you go through life and navigate social media, again, I've had moments where it's been just overwhelming because as a Black woman, as someone who uses my platform, my personal platform for, you know, activist work, as well as just like my own thing, if I want to post a photo of whatever, I'll do that as well. But I've received tons of, I mean, the most hateful comments and messages you can think of, from people telling me to go kill myself to everything else in between. Someone actually told me that they hope that a cop kills me, right? And so there's been moments where I've literally had to just shut down and turn off everything and just breathe, right? And just lay down and go, okay, and just center myself. But aside from that, I think that, you know, and it's also a generational thing, like because I was raised by parents who were young but were also who came of age in the 80s, like the whole thing of caring about others' opinions, which is very much social media, that just wasn't in my household, right? And then I grew up at a time where, like, I still remember a time like without phones and like without social media and with like pagers and whatever. And so I guess my sort of, I don't use social media to be accepted, right? And I think that a lot of us subconsciously do. And that's no fault to us. That's, you know, a product, again, of society, of advertising, of you know, media representations, right? Of trends, of Instagram and social media marketing. These things make us feel like we are not enough, right? And so I think that when it comes to just finding your voice, it's a lifelong journey for some, but just really saying, and excuse my language, but really saying, fuck it, I don't care. I'm going to post or repost something, and I don't give a damn if my friend or my mom doesn't like it, is very, it's very radical, and it's an act of self-love, I think, to be honest with who you are, always, right? And trying not to code switch for certain audiences, you know, it's very important. And when it comes to self-care, I mean, for me, my breathing is a thing. I always check in with myself, and I think that right now, at a time where, and like you said, Bella, you know, it's not necessarily that this time is so unprecedented, even though people love using this word, like the media just loves unprecedented. It's like, no, like we've been getting killed by cops, we've been fighting for our rights, we've been, and we will continue, and we will continue, and we will continue. But for me, it's so important to just check in with myself about my breathing and just really have a moment to breathe, because our breathing and my breathing as a Black woman is being, you know, taken away from me, right? Like my right to literally inhale and exhale it's not a right anymore, and it never has been a right in this colonial society, in this colonial state, right? People are screaming out, I can't breathe. People are calling for their moms as they're being killed, using their last breaths. And so for me, meditating with my breath has been something that's really grounded me. And then something that's not so deep and not so esoteric, I love just watching stupid, like, you know, early 2000s reality TV. I mean, my God, Pimp My Ride. I don't know if any of you know that show, or if some of you are too young for that, but Pimp My Ride, like that is it, you know? if I want to watch a cartoon, I love cartoons, right? And I think that it's important that we find these things that we love, even if people find it silly, or even if no one understands, and we just, commit to those things, right? And continue practicing those things, I think is so important. But again, check in with your breath. You need to watch Pimp My Ride, and don't care what people think. And when you do, or when it does start to get to you, just take a step back and then recalibrate yourself. Maybe take a shower. I like to take showers when I'm feeling crazy and I need to just be in a physical space that's not my space. But self-care looks different for everyone, right? But those are just my methods of self-care. Breathing. Who would have thought that self-care could just be breathing, right? But it helps.
Yeah, I agree with that. Breathing is very helpful all the time. I think for my relationship, and I am sorry that if you hear them both coming out of my window, but these are the sounds of Inwood. I think my relationship with social media has been very much shaped by the fact that I suffer from anxiety and have suffered from depression before. My relationship with social media is very much based on the fact that I grew up with social media. I was 12 years old when I first opened a Facebook account. I was 11 when I opened my MySpace account. And I feel like a lot of us feel that way and have not known a life before social media. And so for us, it just feels standard. It just feels like, well, this is what I have to do to exist in this world. And we forget that that's not true. That we have lives out of a social profile, that we have lives outside of our Instagram and Facebook and whatever it is. So a lot of times, I, as a creator, as a journalist, as a writer, suffer from this thing of like a double-edged sword. I need social media for my work. That's just point blank. Like, I've met so many people, I've networked so well. I found sources, I found gigs, jobs through Twitter, through Instagram. And honestly, my career wouldn't be where it is if it weren't because of those tools. So I think really, as Djali said, there's a whole machine behind these platforms. And you really have to be aware of the fact that if you don't control your usage, that if you don't control the way that you look at it, it will control you. And so I feel like for me, it has become a thing of really being aware of, where are these Instagram posts that I'm seeing really sending me to? I see a girl that got a promotion that I didn't get, and how am I feeling about that? And why is it making me feel that way? And why am I even jealous? I don't even want that promotion, And so many times we feel like, everyone else is having a great life and you're just the only loser that's in your, like scrolling through your Instagram feed. It's really bad for me, for example, when I'm suffering a lot of episodes of anxiety, which I've suffered from a lot during the pandemic. It's like, how do you quiet those voices? How do you tell your voices that they need to go to bed because, whatever that girl was doing yesterday, she probably also had a hard time as well, because we're all going through a pandemic. And so for me, it has become a lot about really focusing on myself and what I think, and really grounding myself in my values and what I believe and what I want, and understanding that those feelings of envying other people's lives based on how they look like on social media will never lead me anywhere, because you will be living your life for other people, and that's not a good way to live as a creator, as an entrepreneur, as a human being. It's not a way to live. And so for me, a lot of self-care has, in the last couple of months, actually has looked like turning off my notifications for Instagram, turning off my notifications for Twitter. I only have Instagram on my phone. The rest I can do on my computer, so I can shut my computer and not look at anything. Because, I feel like the way our media landscape really works is like, it's always inundating you with a lot of information, so that you just feel like a gaslit left and right. So that self-care has helped a lot. But also reconnecting myself with the things that I loved to do when I was a child, when I was a teenager, has been incredible. I actually wrote a piece about taking on ballet again after 4 years during the pandemic. And I literally just started like Googling classes on YouTube and grabbing my bedroom dresser to do a whole ballet class that I hadn't done in 4 years. So things like that, just really reconnecting yourself to your inner child has helped a lot. And as a content creator, you really need to understand, you know, if any of you are in any field that is like creative, I think we force ourselves so much to be in front of a screen, and creativity will never come from that. Creativity will never come from, you know, scrolling through Instagram. Sometimes it does, but that's, you know, a weird light bulb moment. But when I feel like I can breathe, like I can go for a walk, like I can connect with other human beings, that's when, you know, the ideas really start blooming. And so right now, as hard as it is to really connect to other human beings, it's really a time to connect with yourself. So that, I would say, is the best thing, to really just start trusting yourself and start asking yourself the hard-hitting questions of what do you value, where do you want to go, who you are, because otherwise those little voices and the Instagram feed and all of that will just answer them for you, and that's really a sad reality. So yeah, that's kind of where I am at with my self-care right now.
Frances, Djali, thank you so much for your time. My spirit has been lifted just by talking with you both, so I'm so grateful for you sharing your insights. I know it is 6:02, or 6:02 for where I am, 7:02 Eastern time. So I want to be aware of that. If you know, you all have to leave, I understand. I know I would ask you questions all evening. Maybe that could be saved for another time. So I guess I'll go ahead and close. Once again, thank you to everyone who attended, and especially thank you to Djali and Frances for sharing your time and experiences with us. We are so grateful for your insight. Thank you again. Be safe and well.
Thank you, everyone, and feel free to reach out and, you know, send an email, send a DM. Always really happy to help and answer any questions.
Same. I was going to say the same thing. Thank you so much, Bella, for your questions. They were awesome. Thank you, Frances, for taking the time. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to read everyone's names because everyone has their names here. So thank you, Isabel, for coming. And thank you, Maria Camila and Zeleni and Gulshan and Maya. And thank you, Clara and Melanie and Niruti. And thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Lord Crawford. We're all individuals. So wanted to, and I don't know if y'all have heard your name said, you know, like that's another thing about COVID, like really tangentially before we go, like I haven't heard my name be said really by people who aren't like within like my family and like my boyfriend, you know, so like this is cool. So thank you for that. I hope I was able to return the favor for folks. And I'm putting my info in the chat, because feel free, like Frances said, feel free to like email me or to DM me, and if I can support, I will, and if I can't, I will direct you to however I see fit. So thank you, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Make sure to put the information in the chat if you haven't already. This recording will be up on YouTube hopefully by Saturday morning or Thursday or Friday night, my bad. And have a wonderful day/night. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so